Brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Mention offer code TRADITION for a special Christmas offer. Learn more at CharityMobile.com. Pope Francis has, through his mechanisms in the Roman Curia, crushed yet another traditional religious order of nuns. This is not an update on the Arlington Carmelites or the nuns out of Pennsylvania or the other numerous that I've reported on in the past. This is, fortunately, as I predicted in my year in review video on January 1st, something I predicted would happen. Another religious order, at least one in 2025, would be crushed by Rome. Fortunately, I didn't think it would happen quite this quickly into the year, but here we are. Welcome to 2025 in the Bergoglian New Synodal Church. Something to understand here is the mechanism for how this happens. So before we get to the article on the details of this story, there is something you need to understand, and that is, how do they do this? Several years ago, Francis quietly issued a document called Cor Orans. It was a reform of religious life, specifically for nuns. They specifically targeted nuns for this, and I do not understand their loathing for women religious who are especially contemplatives. But fundamentally, what it did is it formed these congresses or these confederations where all nuns of a similar charism, and we'll put that in quotes, would be lumped together. In plain language, it means anybody calling themselves Benedictines would be lumped together with other Benedictines and Carmelites with Carmelites and all the rest. Now, if you are even vaguely aware of the state of religious in the post-conciliar, post-Vatican II era, then you know that there have been multiple kinds of religious. There just have been, all calling themselves Carmelites. For example, there are traditional full-habited Carmelites who are dedicated to the traditional mission of the Carmelites. Then there are religious women who call themselves Carmelites, who pay lip service to the traditional understanding of what being a Carmelite is. They tend to dress in much more modern garb, sometimes street clothes, and they're barely recognizable as nuns. And then there are groups in the middle. There's a full spectrum of these things. You will have this with Dominicans, you'll have this with any religious order you can name. And they are all governed under the same Congress, and the traditional, readily identifiably as Catholic nuns and religious sisters, are grossly outnumbered by anything from just conservative to more modernist, go out and be a nun on the bus kind of orders. Grossly outnumbered. And these congresses always crush the traditional religious. It happens without fail. With that in mind, and I'll give you some more details on this, written by the great Hilary White for The Remnant like 7 years ago now, when this document was issued, some testimony on what this means. But I'm going to give you this update now. And this comes from Europe, not the United States, as reported by EN.News with the headline, Bergoglio Regime Persecutes the IVE Sisters. This is from Gloria TV. They do not hide their bias in the slightest. They're very upfront with it, as you heard already there. This is out of Europe. Specifically, I believe this is out of Spain. They're using Info Católica, synthesizing like 5 articles that I've been keeping an eye on this story on, and I'm very thankful that Gloria TV's EN.News service has a synthesis of this to give you just the quickest version of this. Pray for these sisters and pray for everything going on in the church here. So, go through this article, and I'll give you some context for how this happened. Quote, through the Dicastery for Religious, Francis has appointed a pontifical delegate to govern the Institute of the Servants of the Lord and the Virgin of Matata, the female branch of the Institute of the Incarnate Word, the IVE. He ordered a thorough internal review and, most viciously, banned the admission of new candidates and novices for 3 years, writes Info Católica. The flourishing community, present in many countries, have been the subject of an apostolic visitation between 2021 and 2024 under the pretext of asserting or assessing their, quote, internal situation and the authenticity of their charism. It's a nice way of saying to make sure they're not traditional. The Vatican claims to have discovered, quote, serious deficiencies in the formation and assessment of vocations. It continues to see the mote in the eye of Catholic religious communities while ignoring the beam in the eye of the many decadent seminaries and anti-Catholic religious communities. Francis has appointed the secularized Sister Clara Echarte, who is ashamed to dress in a way that she would be recognized as a religious sister, as papal delegate to govern the Institute and lead a process of integral changes for the worst. The Vatican is said to be concerned about the continued veneration of the founder, Father Carlos Buela, who passed away in 2022, with pilgrimages to his tomb and the circulation of his writings, as if these were real problems in the face of the heresies and immoralities which are menacing today's church. The anti-Catholic visitators also complained about a, quote, lack of preparation of the sisters who assume responsibility for leadership and formation within the Institute, meaning they have not been indoctrinated by anti-Catholic theological institutes, as well as an alleged excessive use of manuals and regulations that hinder a more authentic, meaning decadent, religious life. The pontifical delegate, Sister Clara Echarte, will be assisted by the secularized Sister Maria Jose Miguel, CMT, and will have the authority to appoint other collaborators, will also be in contact with the bishops of the dioceses where the Institute carries out its mission, especially in Beatrice Segni, Italy, and San Rafael, Argentina. The decree stresses the importance of the desired changes in order to guarantee the authenticity of the Institute's charism, meaning the destruction of its Catholic spirit, and its fidelity, meaning betrayal to the evangelizing mission of the Church. Every single human community has problems, but if the Vatican really wants to solve problems in religious communities, there are groups, especially the dinosaur progressivist spectrum, where an intervention would be really necessary. End quote. The changes that they want to see are essentially to strip them of and take them away from their traditional contemplative life. This is the same way it plays out all the time. Francis gave religious instructions several years ago which said, go out and make a mess of things. Contemplative nuns don't really leave their monasteries. They pray and they work in their monasteries and maybe make goods to sell or whatever, so they make enough money to keep their monastery going, but otherwise they do a lot of praying. That's what they do. They pray for the church. That's what they spend their time doing, and God bless them for it. We are all the better as Catholics, and the world is better for their efforts. We do not thank nuns enough for what they do, especially the ones who spend their days praying for those wretched sinners like me so that we may get to heaven. That's what they do. In the past, they were viewed as like the spiritual commandos of the church. Now they seem to be viewed as a nuisance. But how did this happen? How did we get here? Well, we could turn to an article Hillary White wrote for The Remnant many years ago, seemingly, with the headline, A Sister Speaks, Cor Orans is the death knell of the Carmel. Published in The Remnant, May 27th, 2018. If you want to know what this really means for the church, what the aim is here, this is what was told to Miss White in an email she received from an anonymous nun. If any nuns are watching this and you have anything you'd like to say about Cor Orans and what it's done to your institute, please send me an email. I guarantee you your anonymity. But here is what was said in the piece by Hillary White years ago when this happened, when this document was first instituted and what it did to religious. Quote, Today I received an email from a monastery of cloistered Carmelite nuns about the new document from the Vatican's Congregation for Religious. They're helping me examine this document, having kindly volunteered to serve as consultants, to help me understand it from an inside position. These, I might add, are not what we would consider a traditionalist community. They have only the Novus Ordo Mass and use the new Rite Divine Office in their native vernacular language. For obvious reasons, I can't identify them, even to say what country they are in. Writing to me in English by way of introductory comments and their longer analysis of the document that will be forthcoming, Sister T, fully professed and a senior member of the monastery's council, said, quote, The Cor Orans document is the death knell of Carmel. It signals the end of the contemplative monastic life. Not only does it destroy the autonomy of the monasteries, something our Holy Mother St. Teresa was extremely insistent about, but it also removes the superior, dissolves her authority and power, removes the financial independence of each monastery, and destroys the specificity of each charism. This is a disaster, especially for Carmel. End quote. What was wrong with religious life that they needed to update it? Nothing, except for one thing. They have told us that the traditional Latin Mass was not compatible with the ecclesiology of the Church after Vatican II. And that's why it needed to be crushed as much as they could and pushed off to the side. Cardinal Roche said that just 3 years after this happened. He said that in 2021 when Traditionis Custodes was issued, that the ecclesiology, which means the theology of the church and its relationship to the world and its mission in the world, the theology behind the very identity of what the Catholic Church is, no longer is compatible with the same form of the Mass that developed organically, basically from apostolic times until 1969. If they believe that about the Mass, they certainly believe that about the religious, the contemplatives, the nuns that Hilary White was speaking to, are not traditionalists. They are just very conservative, wear habits, and live the contemplative life that we associate with Carmelites. If they have that loathing for them, they have that loathing for traditional ones. And underlying this is the other thing. And I haven't mentioned this, but if you've been watching me for a long time, you already know what I'm about to say, and that's this. There's always a property issue at hand. The land the convents and the monasteries sit on. Whenever they crush nuns, they crush these religious orders, wipe them away, scatter the nuns to new religious communities. Suddenly the diocese that the monastery is in has private property on its hands. And when the Vatican is involved, a very broke Vatican that financially is in such bad place that Francis is now taking away benefits to cardinals to try to tighten the belt, money is involved. To the point now that these bishops know, that since we know, that whenever they do this, they always say, no, money's not a problem here. But I don't believe them. What do you think about this story? Are you surprised the nuns here in this monastery in Spain are having this problem? They said the Vatican has said some really nasty, unverifiable things about their founder. It's pretty common, by the way, that founders of religious communities are later canonized. And that's why that they are venerating him, because that's what happens. You look at the founders of religious orders, the great religious orders, the orders that are named after their founders usually canonize saints. More contemporary orders, meaning from the last 300 or 400 years, they may not be canonized yet, but they are venerated as such, and any miracles that happen are well documented, so they can be examined later, when the time comes for their founder to be canonized. They've said some nasty things about this founder. Meanwhile, the followers of Maciel, the Legionnaires of Christ, and we'll put Christ in quotes there because that is not a good organization, they still exist even though Maciel is the founder of that order. Probably don't need me to explain to you who Maciel was. But let me know what you think of all this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.